Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to yet another Doing Sport Differently live stream. Today, I'm really, really excited, and I know I say that every week, but today I've got some great things to share with you. Well, actually, my guest, Professor Rochelle Eime from Federation and Victoria Universities. Welcome to the live stream.
Thanks very much. Great to be a part of it.
I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. As we said as I was saying before we got on air, in preparation, I wanted to watch one of your videos that you did a presentation for Vic Health and Vic Sport on retention, and somehow or other I lost 3 or 4 hours of my day after that, just reading the different papers that you've written, all on this concept, all in this group of topic of sports participation and trends. So do you want to just give us a little bit of background to the last 10 years of your researching life?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm the Director of Sport and Recreation Spatial, which investigates community-level sport participation and recreation and facilities and health. And it all started with the Vic Health Fellowship, and we're now funded by Vic Health and state government, SRV, and work closely with Vic Sport. And for the past 10 years, we've been working with now 12 major sports in Victoria, and we analyse each year all of their registered club participants from every club in Victoria. And that's around 1 million sport participation records each year that we analyse. And then that helps inform strategies and policy developments for change.
And there's 1,000 different angles we could tackle that research, hence me losing 4 hours of my time, which I thought was great use of my time. But the area I want to look at is, well, a couple of areas. One is retention. And I was staggered to learn that the retention figures, and so you've done some cutting and dicing of the data about the number of participants that participate in 4-year blocks. And so what were the results that came out of that, and the retention rates in the different age groups?
Yeah, well, basically, sport policy is always focused on increasing numbers. So NSOs and SSAs have always focused on increasing numbers, and we hear that through the media, and we see that in terms of their annual reports. But what we did is we investigated those people that continue to play those sports over time, and around 30% sort of drop out, and it is higher, a lot higher amongst adolescents, the dropout in sport, particularly for females around that 15 to 19-year age group. So what we're trying to do is ask the sector to look at retention of participants rather than just getting newbies in and replacing those that drop out.
So what was the, give or take as a broad figure, retention rate for year on year over a 4-year period? How many people are staying on for that 4-year period?
Around 70% sort of stay on, around 30% drop out for memory. But I'd have to go back and look. Unfortunately, I look at many different stats and numbers every day, and it's really hard to keep my head around all of them.
Yeah, and well, actually, I thought it was actually the other way. I'll have to go back and check, but I didn't actually take the notes. I thought it was 30% that stay for the 4 years and 70%.
Over the 4 years, yes, sorry. Each annual year, around 30% of people drop out each year, and that would have been that there was 70% and 30% retained over that 4-year period.
Yeah. So, and for me I've been in club life all my life, and I work in clubs and I talk to clubs every day. I would have thought that intuitively that figure was a lot higher than 30%. And so I think that creates that compelling reason to look at the way the clubs are operating and saying, only 30% of people are enjoying the experience enough to stay for 4 years. And when you look at it, that means 70% are not staying for 4 years in the life cycle of a club. And you go, well, there's something that's fundamentally wrong with the way the clubs are offering themselves to the community, or what community wants from clubs.
Oh, absolutely. And, if you're a business and losing that many clients annually or over 4 years, wouldn't you want to try and understand why? So that's what we're doing as a research team, working with a range of sports and understanding why people want to play sport, by age and by gender, and why they drop out. And it's really interesting because we can feed that information and that knowledge back into industries so that they can modify maybe their products or the culture of the club or what they're offering to try and retain people. And it might be retaining people within the same sport, but in a different form of the sport. It might be about those social, recreation, non-competitive sort of products of the game.
So why are so many people why are there so many people leaving our clubs so regularly? What did the research find?
There's a lot of different reasons. Some of them is based on the individual, so their skill level. So as you go up in your age groups, you might have, 3 under 10 teams, 2 under 12 teams, and 1 under 14 team. So if you don't make that under 14 team cut, there is no option for you, or you're on the bench, and it's not fun sitting on the bench all the time. There's also too social support. So if friends are moving away from sport and during adolescence getting jobs or going to parties and having boyfriends and girlfriends, and your mates aren't involved anymore, they often drop out. But it's also too the competitive model suits those that are very good at that sport and like the competitive model. Now, social sport is not saying it's not competitive. We still try and get the ball through the sticks. That's the nature of the game, but it's less structured. So it's not so much focused on, there's no fixture, there's no necessarily finals. There might be a relaxation of uniforms. There's no training twice a week. You basically just rock up and play.
So when you looked at the motivations, both of adults and of adolescents, fun and enjoyment was the number one scenario by quite a significant way when you compare it to the competitive side of it. Yep. So if we drill down into this concept of fun, because I think fun is a bit of a throwaway word in one regard, because it means, to me, it means Richmond winning premierships, but to others it means a whole lot of other things. So what did the research find from what is fun from an adult point of view and then an adolescent point of view?
Well, for the adults' point of view, the majority of the reasons why people play is for their enjoyment. I mean, you don't play to not enjoy it. I mean, there's other ways you can be physically active, household chores and gardening, but they're not always fun. So it's a choice. So we do it. So we want to have fun doing it. But it's to be with others, and it's the social reasons for adults. So, for example, I still play tennis. I don't necessarily have to play with my friends, but I just want to be with people sort of similar age, and we're just out there to have fun, and have a conversation and maybe a beer afterwards. But for the adolescents, they're more connected to their actual friendship group, so they want to play with their mates. And I've seen that through my own boys who now are 14, but especially during COVID, when they could get back training footy but they couldn't play, it was about them connecting with their mates. I mean, my boys were even excited to get back to school because they wanted to be with their friends. So sport's a great opportunity to be with their friends and to play and have fun. And for adults, it's that social reason as well. Now, you're right about the concept of fun. Some people, fun is a focus on winning, but the far majority, it's not. It's not about the medals and trophies. Why do we give out 5 best on day games awards? The kids know it's irrelevant. That's not what they play. The competitive model is great, but it suits just a very few. So some are super competitive and want to train a lot and want to progress in their actual athletic career. But the far majority just want to get out and play and have fun and not be so focused on winning.
So if we take that right back to the start of the year, when we look at what we actually do, and let's just focus on junior sport for a moment, and like junior sport between the ages of, I think it was 5 and 15, your research told me has 53% of all sports participants. So it's a big whack of the community.
So we're only catering for a 10-year age group in sport.
Yeah. But what we're doing, what they want is fun, social connectiveness. There's a small group that want to be the best of the best. But what we do for the whole lot of them is we bring them in and we grade them. So we potentially separate them from their mates and make them play according to skill level, which is what we're finding isn't what's driving them to be the majority of them to be participating in clubs.
And that's where it's actually a difficult one. It's sort of a double-edged sword, because to actually have fun, you actually need to have a similar level of competency. So if you're really good at tennis and I'm crap, we're not going to have fun. And that's where matching competency is important for enjoyment. But then the flip side is that kids and adolescents want to play with their mates, but that skill divide might be really quite large. So that's often where we can have the competitive model, but also perhaps a more flexible social recreation-based model for friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome to those that are watching us live on online. Gary, very welcome back to you, president of the Knox Tennis Club, one of our most passionate followers. Welcome to you. And the constant changing of tennis club committee people is one of the reasons why professional tennis coaches have people problems, communication problems, personality clashes, that eventually leads to instability of coaching development and junior teams. And it's interesting, Gary, that you raise coaches, because in both the motivations, Rochelle, for what is fun for adolescents and adults was that need or want to be continually improving, not necessarily to be the best player, but I just want to improve my skill week on week. So coaches are really important.
Oh, absolutely. And particularly for adolescent girls, what we found is they wanted a friendly coach. So they didn't want someone yelling and screaming at them. And so they just want to feel included, to have fun, to improve. And so they want that coach to reflect what they want out of sport.
Yeah, and I think even at professional sporting level, we're seeing that evolution changed from fire and brimstone coaches to, if we look at a couple of the reigning premiers in the footballs, Richmond built it off the back of connectivity between coaches and players. And I read a stat with Craig Bellamy, the coach of Melbourne Storm, that he'd been to something like over 150 weddings of his players. So that shows that incredible connectiveness between coach and player.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the power of sport. It brings individuals together for stronger communities. And it's all about social connectedness. We've done a survey during COVID, and, it was all about connecting with others. And that's something that we've really missed this year, because we haven't been able to do that. But it's really been the core of sport. Forever. It's about getting together with others and having fun. And talking about tennis, I actually used to coach out at Croydon, but and at Glen Waverley. And I remember I had a group of adolescent girls on a Friday night, my last lesson, and I was talking to the coach I worked for. I said, "Oh, look, they're not really that great. And, what am I doing wrong?" And he said, no, you're doing fine, because they are improving and they're having so much fun. What they want out of sport is different to what the other people want out of sport. And he goes, go chat to them. So I had a chat to them, and they said, no, we're having a great time. We're here with a bunch of friends. We're getting some help and assistance, and we are improving. They were never going to be, top 10, top 100, but neither of the far majority of us. And that's not what sport should be about. At a community.
And you take me back to just an episode we did a couple of weeks ago in the Doing Sport Differently program, which is, we're really proud to be partnered with Vic Health to bring these stories. But it was the Point Lonsdale Tennis Club, and there was their Tennis for Teens program. They had a pool of money that they could use, and the kids could decide whatever it is they wanted to do with it as part of this program. They bought a table tennis table. They didn't, it's a different sport.
Oh, absolutely. But my boys play competitive tennis. One of my son's in a Tennis Australia squad, so he catches the train down now from Ballarat by himself on a Tuesday. But most of the tournaments, they're long days. You're there for 12 hours a day, and all the kids are lined up playing table tennis, because it's just another way that they can connect. So they might be rivals on court, and really super competitive and taking it seriously. And then that same two players are having fun playing table tennis. So it's about them, because tennis is a very individualized sport. So they're not playing with their mates. It's just an individual against another competitor, but they're a great bunch of friends off court, and their friendship is developed through the table tennis table.
Yeah, and your concept of asking people, why are they leaving? What do you want? That was the Point Lonsdale Tennis for Teens was run by two 50 senior gentlemen, 50 plus, and I love the courage that they had to say to these young kids, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, what do you want to do? What do you want to turn this club into?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I often say this, that, clubs are run often by pale, male and stale, but, older generations that were often very good at the sport and like the competitive model. But how do we as adults and older adults know what the next generation of players want? Society has changed so much, and we shouldn't presume what sport should look like for them. We should just ask them.
Yeah, unquestionably. So that's what you've been doing. So if we've got an identified problem, and I think it's clear when you look at stats now that if 70% of people are not staying for more than, involved in your club for a 4-year period, then that probably says that there's something that needs to be improving. So what is it that you're seeing, or what can clubs be doing to better cater for their communities?
I think it's about having other social sport opportunities. So that means not as big a commitment for training, or maybe even no training. You just rock up. It's about not having to commit to a team. It's, here's a spreadsheet of players and we work out who's playing on what day of who's rocked up. Flexibility of memberships. I mean, memberships, lock in for a whole year. Well, I don't want to commit to a whole year. I don't know if I like your sport yet. I just want to pay each week when I come along. Uniforms. Why do we need tight lycra? I'm not going to play a sport with tight lycra and a skirt. Why can't I play in a t-shirt and some shorts? Why do I need to buy your association apparel to play that? I just want to rock up, play the general nature of the game and have fun with some like-minded people. But the trouble with sport, though, too, is the capacity of the volunteers to deliver another parallel program. I mean, their goal is to deliver the competitive model of sport. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But now we're asking clubs to deliver something else which the society might like. But we can't just rely on the same amount of volunteers. So, I mean, my question is it clubs' role to develop those social sports and to deliver those social sports programs? Is it perhaps local government? Is it healthcare providers or health insurance companies? Or is it a collaboration and a partnership approach? Because the volunteer nature of sport struggles for volunteers and capacity as it is to deliver their traditional model. Who should run social sport?
And that was a really interesting question, where almost we left our first phone call, and I've been thinking about that for a week, and I'll pick up your point there that says the goal or the purpose of the community clubs is to play competitive sport, because I went back and had a look at a whole range of clubs that we did strategic plans for. So we had the club rules for. And I went back and had a look at the club rules, and it wasn't, sometimes it said specifically play in this competitive competition, but inevitably it said grow and promote the sport of in our community. And
yes, but how do they do that when their governance structure is to support their members? So even the governance structure of a state sporting association or national sporting association is to support their members. So if people are playing social sport and aren't actually members, it's not, the structure is not right to actually support them, because the state sporting association is there to support its members, not those other social players who might not be members. So perhaps the membership model needs to change.
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It opens up a whole lot of structures, but we do look at a number of sports that do have this come and play when you want type. We talked about bowls and the development of their barefoot bowls, night owl bowls, but golf has got a come and play type. Public golf courses or public access, come and play when you want.
The problem
is
is
it thinking about it differently?
Oh, absolutely. But also, too, we're not capturing information of these participants. So when sport's trying to go to government and get support for infrastructure, or to say the value of sport in terms of physical, mental and social health, we're missing a big part of the pie, because we're only counting registered players.
Yes.
Now, pre-COVID, I used to play golf once or twice a year. Now I'm playing twice a week. But I'm not signing up for a yearly membership, because I just don't know what's going to happen. I'm never going to play the flexible options of 18 holes. Sorry, I'm never going to play competition golf. But I rock up on an afternoon with my sons and we play. And we put our names down because we have to during COVID, and pre-COVID we don't. And I pay my $15 for 9 holes, which is a bargain, because my boys are members. But I'm not actually registered with Golf Victoria. If you and I go and have a hit of tennis every week, we could play weekly down a local club and just pay our court hire, but we're not necessarily registered with that sport. And that's where I think we need to try and improve the capture of data on social sort of sport, as well as the membership data that we're currently reporting on.
Well, and pickleball is a great example of a social sport that is increasing with popularity, which is unquestionably it is. And pickleball is a sport I hadn't even heard of 6 months ago, and staggered at how fast it is growing. But if I go back to I would like to explore this. Whose role is it? Because I do fundamentally think it is the role of clubs, but I also understand that the extreme stress that the volunteer structure is under at the moment, and I think that's an area that needs to change as well. But if I go back to another guest that we had, which was Chris Wall from the Frankston Stingrays Hockey Club, they were a pure men's. I think they had a Wednesday kind of semi-competitive, social competitive team, and then they had the Saturday afternoon really competitive team. A couple of years ago, the club then introduced Hockey Australia, Hockey Victoria's J-ball format, so introducing the sport. And I want to come to your question about how do people that haven't started the sport, how do they enter a sport? So they had the J-ball, then they had the Hockey Sixes, I think it was, and then they did that for a couple of years, and now that's the foundation of their pyramid. That's the strength by which they build their club from. And I think that was a great model of a club introducing the social side of it, and then building pathways into competitive, but also back out of competitive.
Yeah. Absolutely, that cycle effect of transitioning maybe within that same sport but into different opportunities. I think, good clubs that have good governance and a good culture and a good amount of volunteers can thrive in that space. It's those that maybe have, a traditional mindset that, no, we don't do social sport and so forth, but it's how to try and encourage clubs to do it, but it's how to support them to do that, and how do we support training and educating of volunteers, and whose role is that? So, I don't disagree that it's not necessarily the role of the clubs, but how do we support the clubs and in those volunteers? Or is it that private commercial organisations, and it's a partnership approach with them as well? I mean, we see that a lot of commercial sport and active recreations are thriving because they are professional in their approach. I do Pilates and go to the gym. Pilates with a mask on is not that much fun at the moment, but yes, it is more expensive than maybe a club membership, but you've got that professional services that come with that. So I think we just need to look at the system as a whole, and then look at where that support needs to be. Because we've got, like you said, we've got the social programs. There's been a lot of development with sports and with funding from Vic Health, etc., like your J-Ball. Yeah. They're developed. So those products are in place, and there's been marketing of that and good development. But you can't have the same volunteers running Saturday sport and then the weekend training of that and these social programs as well.
Yeah, and in answer to your question, one of the obvious answers to your question, who helps the volunteers? That's the sole purpose of sports community, is to help clubs, and I guess our signature kind of training is how to create that culture of volunteering, how to go from where the committee does all the work to where everyone in the community, not just the club, but the community, is contributing to the goals of the club. And I think the community will embrace clubs more if the goals of the club are diversified away from the competitive, but to more to what the traditional was, to grow and promote the sport of within the community of. That will
absolutely. And that's the messaging and the communication as well. So we've got some clubs and leagues, here in Ballarat, of different sporting codes, and all we hear about is the men's A-grade team and their premiership or them winning and so forth. So if that's only about the communication about the men's A-grade team winning or losing and by what margin and who's playing this week and so forth, well, then that's detracting from what the core values of that club should be and what the community would like.
But yet when we look at the analytics of community sports clubs, and we look at their social media posts, and we look at their websites and their stories and such, the scores and the match reports a very low ranking as in terms of interest within the community of even that club community. It's all the stories, it's the interaction, it's the fun, it's the what happens.
It's the camaraderie on and off the field, basically, and that's where social media can really help. But that's where we need the younger generation involved and getting them take on some of those roles, because they get it and they can do it so easily, and they love sharing photos. Oh my gosh, how much do they share photos of themselves and video clips? So we need them to drive that social media connection with communities, because they do it so well. It's second nature to them.
Well, and I've said this often because this comes up quite regularly in the Doing Sport Differently live streams, but you should see the fear on the president's face when you say you should hand over the social media to the 16-year-olds. But you're unquestionably right, because A, they're using the platforms more than anyone else, and B, they know what their audience wants, and it's opening up their club to a whole new audience that we traditionally haven't got. But I want to come to this point of, if we open up to a whole new audience, that means we're not just introducing people to our game at that entry level, the Auskick level, the T20 Blast, Net Set Go. We're introducing them to our game at all ages now, and we're not really well set up for that, are we, as sports, to bring people in?
Absolutely, because you need skill and competency to actually have fun. And so generally that's developed in the fundamental motor skills and development and sport-specific skills when people are young, but we need to consider how people can enter sport at all ages, and that's where these social programs can really help, because it's not about winning, it's about coming and having a try. But I also too question is, how do we promote, and how do people join a club? So I've joined many clubs across different states across my lifespan in a few sports, and with my children now. And even though I'm good at sport, my family's good at sport, and we're extroverted people, I still haven't joined a club unless I've known someone at that club.
Yeah.
And so it's that social connectedness again. So how does someone that has never played a sport, their family's not really into sport, they're not going to just find a website and a number and just call it, or rock up and knock the door and say, here I am, know nothing about what you are, don't know if I want to enjoy it, don't know if I'm going to be here, I'm not going to be in your A grade team, I'm not going to win your medal, what have you got for me? I mean, it's just not going to happen. So I think we need to look at snowballing effect, and how do we increase our reach in the community through connecting through our current participants.
So one of the things with researchers is they look back at data. So you've done 10 years looking back, living the life, but you've got the benefit of looking at 10 years of data. If I can, 5 years from now, or even 10 years from now, what do clubs look like, do you think?
I'd like to think they're thriving social community hubs, and more diverse. So more diversity in terms of ages, more diversity in terms of culturally diverse, more opportunities for people with a disability, more inclusive of our communities, because at the moment they cater for a very narrow part of our community. I'd like them to be more inclusive and more of a community hub.
Do you think if clubs don't do that, they'll be around in 10 years?
No.
No, me neither.
No.
Me neither. I can't see how clubs will survive unless they start to embrace what the community wants and, more importantly, needs. And
it's also too, because the next generation of kids, unfortunately, they don't have the fundamental motor skills and development, physical literacy and competency to play competitive sport necessarily. So then if they're not playing competitive sport, and you can't tell kids to go for a ride around the block, it's good for your health. I mean, that's just going to tell you to get stuffed. So we've got to find something that's enjoyable for them to be active in. And I think that's where social sport can play a really large role for those, unfortunately, that don't have really good fundamental motor skills. And there's a lot of adolescents and adults that don't. So that's where social sport can play a big role.
That's right. And there are a lot of sports that are, I mean, we've spoken a little bit about bowls today, but the indoor ball sports, the netballs, the badmintons, predominantly indoor,
volleyball and
basketball, squash, indoor cricket, futsal, in, out, play, short season. If we're going to do a season, there might be rotating times, etc. There's lots of examples of it working now and forever. And that's, I would suggest that's the reason that, say, sports like basketball have been such big participation numbers, because it's that catering exactly to what the community needs.
Absolutely. But they're in and out an hour. So an hour is a lot what people want to commit. So it's an hour of the gym, it's an hour of Pilates, or 45 minutes. So it's out in an hour, that a lot of those indoor sports, or an hour and a half, do really well. And that's so we've got to think about, there's not just the structure of sport, but the timing of sport. I mean, how long does your cricket match go for?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, it depends on who you're talking to, but typically midday to 6 is or 1 o'clock to 6, and that's a big whack of time in a person's life. But in my life, I couldn't do that anymore, and I've played all my life because I work Saturdays with clubs.
Yep.
So that means I can't play cricket. So, an hour is a long time in a person's life. Half an hour of your time has probably changed many clubs for the next 10 years. So, Rochelle, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience. I think we would be doing everyone a great service if you would come back after Christmas and keep sharing your knowledge with us, and we'll keep taking it out to clubs and just try and make sure that as many clubs as we can in 10 years' time are still around and are great community hubs for their communities. So
great. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today.
All right, thanks. Pleasure.
Okay, that is another session down for the Doing Sports Differently live stream. So we're so grateful that Vic Health will we get to partner with Vic Health and get to share the stories of the clubs that are doing sport differently, but also, really importantly, get access to the great researchers like Rochelle that are really creating the foundation for informed decision-making moving forward. So, Rochelle, again, thank you very much. To everybody that stayed online, thank you so much. And we'll see you next week in another episode of Doing Sport Differently.